Okay. All right, that's good. We have to arm wrestle you for it. Thank you very much, Speaker. I'm pleased to have 20 minutes this afternoon to put some remarks on the record in regard to Bill 122, the Broader Public Sector Accountability Act. And before I get into my sort of personal remarks, I just want to read a bit of the formality of what it is that this legislation is going to do. As we know, the Auditor General brought in his report on October 20th, and on the same day, our Minister, Deb Matthews, introduced this particular piece of legislation. And if passed, this is what the legislation is going to do. It's going to prohibit all agencies, designated broader public sector organizations, hydro entities, and most organizations that receive more than $10 million in public funds from using public funds to retain lobbyists. It's going to increase accountability in the broader public sector by requiring some of the broader public sector entities and orgs to follow standards established by the Management Board of Cabinet on procurement. It's going to require each LHIN and hospital to submit a report on its use of consultants. It's going to require each LHIN and hospital to post on their public websites information about their expense claims. It's going to require each broader public sector org to comply with regs, if any, which require the public posting of expenses. Additionally, it's going to establish expense claim rules for designated broader public sector orgs and guidelines for publicly funded organizations, and also increase accountability and transparency in hospitals and LHINs by requiring the head of the organization to annually submit a report to the minister attesting to the completion and accuracy of reports required on the use of consultants, the organization's compliance with the prohibition of retaining a lobbyist using public funds, the organization's compliance with procurement directives issued by Management Board, the organization's compliance with the expense claim directives issued by Management Board, and finally, it will make hospitals subject to passing, subject to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, effective January 1st, 2012. Speaker, that's what Bill 122 is going to do. Now, I would like to spend just a bit of time letting people following this debate on television know how it is that we arrived here. It's probably been mentioned before, but it bears mentioning again. Some years ago, when we first were elected in government, it was us as a Liberal government that expanded the authority of the Auditor General to, in fact, give the Auditor this authority that has led to the report that has come to us today. Previous to that, the Auditor could not have investigated LHINs, he could not have investigated hospitals, and the report that's before us that has led to this legislation, in fact, is something that we would not have been able to see. And perhaps when the opposition parties have an opportunity to speak further on this bill, they'll explain why, when they had opportunity and the privilege to be government in the province of Ontario, they did not extend that same authority to the Auditor General. As we know, as a result of that, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, they went off and they used this new authority, and the report that he tabled led us to where we are today. That is our government's response, Bill 122, the Broader Public Sector Accountability Act. Speaker, at its core, at its heart, what the legislation is about is transparency and accountability. Like all members, I took a keen interest in the municipal elections that occurred in my riding, Thunder Bay-Atikokan, City of Thunder Bay, and in the surrounding municipalities in my riding. And I can tell you that the issues of transparency and accountability were on the lips of most people, on the lips of most candidates. And whether or not it is justified, it seems like in municipalities, there is an interest with the voters that all orders of government, be they municipal, provincial, or federal, need to be more transparent, more accountable than they currently are being. Whether or not it's the case, people feel it, and they want to see it. This legislation is responding to that, as I said. Speaker, there are a few things that I want to talk about briefly that, when we think about transparency and accountability, are not items that the electorate would probably consider or think about, but they are issues that, as a government, we've addressed. And before I get to the more formal list, and that's a relatively expansive list, a list that, in fact, members of the opposition voted against when we tried to provide a little bit of sunshine and to provide more transparency and accountability. I'll get to that list later. But I have a few things as examples that I want to illustrate for people following this debate on TV that we have, in fact, done years ago, long before this issue got us to the point that we're at today. Number one, in the election of 2003, as an example of our government commitment to more transparency and more accountability. We came in, and the voters may remember that in very short order, the auditor of the day had identified that we in fact inherited a $5.5 billion deficit. Going into the election of 2003, the opposition party today, the government of the day at that time, was clearly articulating to the electorate that the books were balanced, that maybe there was a little surplus. I don't remember if they were saying there was a surplus or not, but clearly they were articulating that there was no deficit. And when we came in, an auditor number, not a government number, indicating that there was indeed a $5.5 billion deficit. So what did we do in response? We brought in legislation that ensured that can never happen again. So from now on, going into every provincial election, the Auditor General will provide a snapshot of the finances of the province so that going into the election, the electorate will know exactly what the state of the books of the province of Ontario are. We did that. That's extremely transparent, and that's being extremely accountable, I would suggest. That's one of the things we did. We did that, I don't remember how many, probably 5 or 6 years ago. October 6th next year, 2011, there'll be a provincial election. Premier McGuinty, our government, brought in legislation, only the second province in Canada to do so, establishing fixed election dates. And we can all tell around this place that the election has long since started. We can tell by the tenor of the debate. We can tell by the tone of the debate. We can tell, in fact, the official opposition is running television commercials all the time already. Now, had they not known that there was going to be an election on October 6th of next year, I don't imagine they'd be running those TV commercials now. But the target is there, the focus is there. As a government, we brought that legislation in. By so doing, the Premier and the government of the day gave up quite a bit of power, I would say, in terms of the ability to pick the election date to necessarily and best suit the purposes of the government of the day. We gave that up. Now it's transparent. You can't manipulate the timing of the election to best serve your own purposes, and we did that. And that's next year. That'll be the second such time that's occurred under our watch. One of the third things that I think that people don't often think about, Speaker, when it comes to transparency and accountability, refers back to the election of 2003 as well. And I mentioned this last week in a 2-minuter in response to one of the other members' speeches. In 2003, the election results came in. The third party, the NDP, elected 8 members to the legislature. To have official party status in the legislature according to the standing rules, I think you needed, was it 10 or 12 you needed? I can't remember what it was. If you needed 12, I think it was 12 that you needed for official party status. In any regard, in 2003, the NDP had 8 members elected. They did not have official party status. Our government changed the rules. We amended the standing orders. We changed it to accommodate the 8 members from the third party that were here. And by so doing, I think we flowed about $1 million in resource to the 8 members representing the third party here, so that they could play a vigorous role in terms of trying to represent the interests of their constituents to the people of the province of Ontario. We did that. We didn't have to do that, but we did it. And along with that, I think the leader of the third party at the time also got a $30,000 or $40,000 raise. I think. Can't remember for sure. But $1 million of resource went to the third party. We changed the rule. We didn't have to do that. They had 8 members elected. The rule said you have to have 12 to be an official party to get all that resource. We did it. I think of that in terms of transparency. I think of that in terms of accountability. I don't know if other people do, but I think that's pretty significant. Speaker, for the last little while, in this place, the opposition parties have been having some fun when it comes to the LHINs, Local Health Integration Networks. They've become a bit of a, I don't know what you want to call it, a bit of a bureaucratic political piñata. You know, they're taking their turns whacking their big stick against the LHINs. Apparently they've decided that the LHIN organizations as part of the healthcare system in Ontario are going to be one of the issues that they plant their ideological flags on as they go into the next election on October 6, 2011. They're going to use this as something to exhibit to the people of the province that we fumbled healthcare, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. But I want to tell you something. I want to tell you where I come from on the LHINs. I'm not sure why they're going there. They think it's an easy one to do. I remember when I was first elected, one of the things that the people in my riding of Thunder Bay-Atikokan disliked the most was that they felt that the people in the South didn't get it when it came to decision-making in a lot of issues, especially health care. They thought that